Hello, I'm Dr. Katherine Krefft, clinical psychologist. This is the second in a series of videos about how to manage anxiety during the COVID-19 pandemic. We'll be doing several of these, and I will be referencing what we talked about in preceding videos. So if you learn these strategies for working with fear, now you'll be able to carry on after the pandemic and use the same strategies. The first strategy is to pay attention to our breathing. The first video emphasized the importance of diaphragmatic breathing. An excellent website to actually see video demonstrations of diaphragmatic breathing is the American Lung Association site, lung.org, which I do refer you to. It's excellent. In summary, what happens to us when we're anxious, when we're afraid, is we begin to alter our breathing pattern. When we alter our breathing pattern, we get less oxygen into our lungs. Less oxygen in our lungs means less oxygen in our blood. Less oxygen in our blood means less oxygen in the brain. When the brain perceives that your oxygen level has dropped, the brain itself panics. That's why I say the brain panics before you do. What reverses this process is tricking the brain into believing that it has more oxygen than it did a few moments ago. And you do that by purposely engaging diaphragmatic breathing. Breathe in deeply, pooch out your stomach, get in as much air as you can, hold it, let it go. Do that 2-3 times, as many times as you need, until you begin to feel differently. When the brain begins to receive well-oxygenated blood, the brain itself will turn off that panic signal. When you do that, you are then able to move into the next phase of anxiety management, which is to employ strategies that you will learn in these videos to handle your fear. When the brain stops panicking, we are then able to engage this part of our brain, the frontal cortex, the thinking brain. This is the part of the brain that we need to really help ourselves. Have you ever said to yourself or heard someone say, "I'm so upset, I can't even think straight"? That's an accurate statement. That is indeed what happens when the brain becomes all befuddled with strong emotion. The frontal cortex does not work at its optimal level. We then begin to make false understandings, erroneous decisions, and get ourselves possibly into a lot of trouble. So before we try to think straight, it is critically important that we calm the brain and get the brain as much oxygen as it needs. When the brain has enough oxygen, we can indeed visit fear, but refuse to live there. So the second of our strategies is to really focus on understanding there is an enormous difference between social distancing and emotional distancing. Another common experience, which you may have felt at some point in your life, is feeling alone in a room. You're in a crowded room, but you feel alone. So you see from that emotional closeness has nothing to do with physical distance. Doesn't matter if you're 1 foot away from people or 3 feet or 6 feet. Emotional distancing is quite something different than social distancing. We human beings are social creatures. Just as anxiety, as I said in the first video, anxiety is not something we have. Anxiety is something we do, something the body does with its hormones, with the oxygen level, with the neurotransmitters in the brain. In the same way, being social is not something we do. Being social is who we are as human beings. So this pandemic is very difficult on us, precisely for the reason it's asking us to do something that it's not in our nature to do, which is to be, in a sense, antisocial, to push people away, to stay away from people. We want to make a difference, a separation in our mind then, between social distancing, 6 feet apart, which we must do, stay home as much as possible, which we must do, make a difference between that kind of distancing and emotional distancing. Because if we are to be healthy as human beings, we cannot allow ourselves to be emotionally distant. Human beings that are totally emotionally cut off from other human beings are fundamentally very lonely, but may actually also become mentally and emotionally ill. So that kind of distancing is not an option. I'd like to tell you a story that emphasizes how intrinsically human emotional closeness is expressed through physical closeness. Now this story stuck in my mind, though it's something that happened many decades ago. Many decades ago in South America, somewhere in Chile or Peru, 2 Peace Corps volunteers were walking down a street, 2 young women. As they walked down the street side by side, an earthquake happened. The earthquake was a bad one. Stones and bricks rained down on their heads. When it was safe enough for the authorities to go around the town searching for bodies, and they removed the stones from where these 2 young women lay, they found them with their arms around each other, hugging each other. They died hugging each other. I think this is a very poignant example of how much we human beings need each other, need to reach out to each other, need to find emotional closeness by reaching for each other, by touching each other, hugging each other, kissing each other. We need each other. However, at this time, we must limit all such physical closeness. It's just not safe. We prefer physical closeness. We need emotional closeness. We can teach ourselves to stay physically distant during this time. But if we think that that's going to mean that we're going to lose emotional closeness or not build on emotional closeness, not only will we have nations of people that are physically sick, we will have nations of people that are emotionally distressed too. And that's just not an option. During this time, we are seeing people intuitively understand how much we need each other. One way this is being shown is mutual aid societies are forming. They're springing up all over the place. These are groups of people who get together on their own, nobody's telling them to do it, simply to work together to help in whatever way they can. To deliver groceries to the elderly, for example. A good description of a mutual aid society, if that interests you, is at lamag.org. That's LAMAG.org. The article to search for at that site is Solidarity, not charity. Solidarity, not charity. I like that. This is an example of one of the 2 things that I'm recommending today. to help us all keep our emotional closeness, but deal with the social distancing we have to put up with in this pandemic. We need each other, and we show that through the groups we belong to in our lives. We all need two types of groups. The first is a large group. The second is a small group. You may have more than one large group that you belong to, and you may have more than one small group that you belong to. But isolating yourself emotionally is not going to help. We need the community that connecting with other people gives us. So belonging to a group is about nurturing our emotional selves by connecting in some form of community. There are many examples of large groups. You may already belong to groups, associations of some sort. See if you can turn to those groups and begin to further develop them. Or, if you don't belong to any large group at this point, search something out. Figure out, how can you connect? Being scared is hard. Being scared all by yourself is terrible. Please don't do that to yourself. There are many organizations out there that you can search for. I don't care if it's the National Association of Knitters or the National Association of whatever. Find a group that you can belong to. Large groups. Large groups, small groups. We may participate in large groups through today's social media. However, I'm not talking about using social media to augment your list of 30,000 friends or followers or likes. There's an area of psychology called social psychology. I'm a clinical psychologist, but social psychologists for over 100 years have studied the psychology of how human beings act in groups. And we've discovered many amazing things, and some are rather the opposite of what a lot of people believe. Large groups, for us human beings, large groups automatically break out into smaller groups. The large group breaks into a smaller group, which breaks into a smaller group, which breaks into a smaller group. And so, although people like to claim they have 3,000 friends or 30,000 friends, that's actually impossible. It doesn't happen. When I heard this term being used years ago, I thought to myself, oh, that's really sad. That's going to mislead so many people. You can have 30,000 people in your community. You can have 3,000 people in your community, but not 30,000 or 3,000 friends. Yet we all need the closeness of small groups, as well as the community of belonging to a large group. The type of large group I'm talking about is an interactive group. So I'm not just talking about picking some websites that you're going to visit regularly. They may be very helpful, that's great if they are, but see if you can find a large group that you can in some way be interactive with, so that you communicate and connect and contact people. That's what nurtures our feelings of emotional closeness. Besides the larger groups that we belong to, the second type of group that's critically important for our emotional health to allay anxiety is the small group. The primary small group is the family. This is the family we have been born into, and any other family we create for ourselves in our lifetime. We may think we know our family. We were born into that family. But if your mother had 4 or more children, then please understand that it was natural and inevitable that that larger group was going to break up into smaller groups. Same thing for your extended family. You have an extended family that includes aunts, uncles, cousins, and many other people. You cannot possibly be emotionally close to that many people. You may be friendly with them at the family reunion, but we humans just have this inbuilt tendency to seek out a small, comfortable group. You can have 2 or 3 close friends, 4 close friends. People have reported feeling very close as being a part of a group of 5. But for most people, when you get much past 4 or 5 people, the group is going to break up into smaller groups. In working with people over the years, I have found that when people misunderstand this, they get their feelings hurt enormously because somebody in the family talks to somebody else more than they talk to them. This is simply part of the natural process of being human. Although we, in our social media, like to believe we can have 30,000 friends, nature seems to know, no, you can't. 3, 4, maybe 5, that's it. Find your small group. This is when I say small group, this is what I mean. 3, 4, 5 people. Find your small group. Reach out to family now at this time. Reach out to those who are at a distance, to your biological family. See if you can renew your relationships with them. How about those that you haven't talked to in a long time? Why not give it a try? Maybe you can call them and contact them, video chat with them in some distant city and say, hey, how's the staying at home going in your city? Renew your attempts to create family for yourself. If that doesn't work, well, we'll talk about that in the next video. Besides family, friends are the family we create. I have worked with many people who, for a variety of reasons, just are not close to any biological family member. That's sad, but it happens for a number of reasons. Please don't let that stop you. You still need to belong to a small group. Friends are the family we choose. So choose some friends. That larger group I was speaking of a few moments ago that we need to belong to, one reason it's important is because usually it's from those larger groups that we discover people who we can be friends with, and sometimes be very close friends with. This small group nurtures our emotional needs, and that helps us allay our anxiety in ordinary times and in these times too. If this subject, the psychology of groups, interests you, and you're looking for something to read, you might Google social psychology or psychology of groups, and you may learn some interesting things that you had not realized about how groups of human beings act together. We all need groups. We are social creatures. Figure out how you can get yourself involved with a large group and begin to work on your smaller group so that you can be sure you have emotional closeness during this difficult time. This is anxiety management, learning how to do the things that we need to do in order to nurture ourselves emotionally. We will figure that out together. Honoring our emotions requires that we take the actions we need to take in order to nurture ourselves so that when we are afraid, and after we have practiced our breathing, we have someone to turn to talk to about how we feel. That person will probably be someone who's in your primary small group. Maybe your family, maybe the family you create by nurturing friendships. Thank you so much for listening. This is a difficult time for all of us. Learning how to distinguish emotional distancing from social distancing is a positive that we may nurture ourselves and get out of this, figure out how to do this in this time, make some positive use of this time. Please know, heaven is with us. May your angels bless you.